a beautiful island hiding a reality of economic struggles, social expectations, and ambition laced with quiet desperation. Natalie was 34, tall, striking, and magnetic. Once crowned Miss Montego Bay at 19, her name had been whispered with admiration in beauty circles. But the fame faded quickly. Now, years later, she was known mostly as the wife of Dwayne Sinclair, a man everyone respected, perhaps more than she did. Dwayne was 38, disciplined, and humble to a fault. He had grown up in a single-parent household in Hanover Parish and had worked his way up from hotel bellboy to a senior supervisor at one of the top resorts on the island. A devout Christian, loyal to his wife, and always present in his community and church, Dwayne represented what many called a good Jamaican man. But being good wasn't always enough. Behind closed doors, their modest two-bedroom home just outside the city center told a different story. The counters were clean, the air fresh with lavender oil, but the tension was thick and constant. Natalie was restless. She wanted more, a lot more. She would often scroll through social media, envying old friends and rivals who had married rich men, moved to Miami, or owned high-end boutiques in Kingston. One evening, sitting across from Dwayne at the dinner table, she asked the question she had asked many times before. How long you going to wait before they promote you again? You're still working under people who came in after you. Dwayne sighed, rubbing his temple. Promotion don't happen overnight, Natalie. Me work hard, me keep faith. When the time is right. When the time is right? She cut him off, raising her voice slightly. Dwayne, we've been in this same damn house for 5 years. I'm tired of waiting. I deserve more than this. We both do. He stared at her, silent. He loved Natalie, but lately he could feel her slipping through his fingers. Emotionally, spiritually, and now perhaps morally. But Natalie wasn't just dissatisfied. She was scheming. She had grown tired of playing the role of the devoted wife while watching opportunities pass her by. She wanted to be seen, worshipped even, not just for her beauty but for her potential. She wanted to be a woman of influence, not the wife of a man who always came in second. And then came the invitation that would change everything. Dwayne received an email from upper management. He had been selected to attend a 3-day executive retreat, a private haven owned by the resort's CEO, Mr. Julian Hartford. It was a rare opportunity to network with senior leaders, an event that could open doors for future advancement. Natalie insisted on going with him. You said it's for families too, right? Spouses. He hesitated. Yes, but it's not exactly a vacation, Nat. It's work. Work for you, she said, putting her hand on his chest. For me, it might be the beginning of something new. He didn't understand what she meant at the time, but Natalie already had a plan, one that didn't just involve standing behind her husband. She intended to step out in front. At that retreat, Natalie would meet Julian Hartford, a man who could give her everything she ever wanted, at a deadly cost. At the top of Jamaica's luxury tourism pyramid stood one man, Julian Hartford. To outsiders, he was the embodiment of Caribbean success. British-born to Jamaican parents, Oxford-educated, and razor-sharp in both business and charm. At 52, Julian was the CEO and founder of Hartford Resorts Group, a hospitality empire boasting 5-star properties stretching from Montego Bay to Ocho Rios. Locally, he was called the King of the North Coast. He wore linen suits in the day, silk shirts at night, and never traveled without a Cuban cigar or a younger woman on his arm. He was rich, connected, feared, and, above all else, untouchable. To the staff under him, he was both revered and resented. Promotions depended not just on performance but on favor, and those who gained his attention soared. Those who didn't stayed stuck for years. Julian thrived on control of business, people, and outcomes. When the executive retreat, Dwayne Sinclair was hopeful. This was his chance. He arrived in a modest car with Natalie by his side, dressed in a cream silk dress, her long braids cascading over her shoulders, and an aura of quiet determination. She had one goal, get noticed. And she did. During the welcome cocktail party on the open terrace overlooking the ocean, Julian spotted her within moments. She laughed easily, her skin glowing under the warm lighting, her eyes catching his from across the room. Dwayne was speaking to another manager, unaware of the growing tension between his wife and his boss. Julian approached them with his signature smile. "Dwayne, isn't it? Julian Hartford. Pleasure to finally meet you." Dwayne straightened up, grateful. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." Julian's eyes didn't linger on Dwayne for long. He turned to Natalie, extended his hand, and said, "And you must be his better half. I don't believe we've met. I'm Julian." Natalie shook his hand, held his gaze a second too long, and replied smoothly, "I know who you are." From that moment, the game had begun. Over the next 2 days, Julian kept finding reasons to speak with Natalie. During brunch, by the pool, in the lobby lounge. At first, it seemed innocent. Small talk, business advice, compliments. But Natalie was receptive. More than that, she encouraged it. She wore her most flattering outfits, made witty remarks, and laughed a little louder when he was near. Dwayne noticed something but couldn't name it. He chalked it up to Natalie's extroverted nature, her charm. But deep down, he felt something shifting. A quiet erosion of control, of trust. One evening, during a private dinner for senior executives and their guests, Julian made a toast. He raised his glass and said, "Behind every great man is a woman even greater. Some of you gentlemen are luckier than you know." His eyes landed on Natalie, who gave the slightest smile. Later that night, after Dwayne had gone to bed early with a headache, Natalie stepped outside for fresh air. She found Julian on the deck, smoking a cigar. Alone, they talked for hours. About ambition, about beauty, about power. "You're wasted in Dwayne's shadow," Julian eventually said. "You were made for more." Natalie leaned against the railing, her voice quiet. "Then show me how." From that night on, they were bound. Not by love, but by a mutual hunger. Hers for power, his for possession. What began on a moonlit deck in Montego Bay would spiral into manipulation, obsession, betrayal, and eventually murder. The retreat ended, but the spark Julian and Natalie had ignited refused to fade. Back in Montego Bay, life for the Sinclairs returned to its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. Dwayne resumed his shifts at the resort, clocking in early, managing staff, resolving guest complaints, and coming home exhausted but hopeful. He believed the retreat had gone well, that his name was finally being noticed. He had no idea that the attention had shifted, not to him but to his wife. Julian had Natalie's number. He texted her just 2 days after the retreat. "Julian, still thinking about that night on the deck. You're unforgettable. Meet me?" At first, Natalie hesitated. She knew what this meant. She wasn't a fool. This wasn't a job offer or a mentorship. It was an affair, plain and simple. But the temptation was stronger than her conscience. Julian offered her something Dwayne never could, access to power. They met at a villa outside of Negril. Hidden, private, luxurious. Natalie arrived wearing a low-cut black blouse and gold hoop earrings. Julian greeted her with a bottle of wine and a view of the ocean. No one spoke of guilt. No one acknowledged the betrayal. This wasn't about love. It was about control. As the weeks passed, their affair deepened. Julian spoiled her. He flew her to Kingston in a private helicopter for dinner. He bought her a gold chain with a sapphire pendant. He sent a chauffeur to pick her up when Dwayne was at work. It was a fantasy wrapped in luxury and secrecy. And with every encounter, Natalie's world tilted further away from her marriage. But Julian wanted more than just her body. He wanted her loyalty. One night, while lying beside her, he whispered, "I can make you a businesswoman. I can put your name on a salon in Mobay. You ever wanted to own your own spa?" Natalie's eyes widened. She'd always dreamed of it. A beauty spa with her name on the sign, her face on the advertisements, wealthy clients calling her Miss Sinclair with envy in their voices. "You'd do that for me?" she asked. "If you're mine," Julian said without blinking. It was a deal made in the dark, but one she agreed to. Soon, Natalie's life began to change. She started dressing differently, speaking differently, even carrying herself with a new arrogance. Dwayne noticed. "You've changed," he told her one morning as she applied makeup before sunrise. "I've grown," she replied flatly. "Maybe you should try it too." He didn't know how to respond. The woman he had married, the one who once held his hand in church and whispered dreams of family and future, was slipping away. Or worse, transforming into someone he no longer recognized. Then came the most shocking revelation of all. Natalie was pregnant. She discovered it one humid afternoon in late July. The two pink lines stared back at her from the bathroom counter. Her heart raced, not from joy but panic. She stared at herself in the mirror, one hand resting on her belly. She knew without a doubt, it wasn't Dwayne's baby. The timing didn't add up. She hadn't been intimate with Dwayne in over a month. But with Julian, almost weekly, the baby was his. And instead of fear, Natalie felt something darker, more dangerous. Power. A child with Julian would tie her to him forever. It would give her leverage, more than the spa, more than the jewelry. It would make her indispensable. And maybe, just maybe, it would help her leave Dwayne behind completely. But Dwayne would not let go so easily. One night, he came home early and found Natalie on the phone in the backyard. She was whispering, but he heard enough. "Yes, Julian. He doesn't know anything." Dwayne's blood froze. He didn't say a word. He stood in the shadows and listened until she hung up, then crept back out and slammed the car door loud enough for her to hear. She greeted him with a forced smile, kissed his cheek, and served dinner like nothing had happened. But the damage was done. In that moment, Dwayne realized something was terribly wrong. And for the first time in their marriage, he began to question if he had married a stranger. What Dwayne didn't yet know was that this pregnancy, the very life growing inside Natalie, would ignite a chain of events that would spiral out of control, leaving blood on the floor and bodies in its wake. Dwayne couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Natalie, laughing into her phone, whispering Julian's name, turning away from him more and more each day. The woman he loved had secrets blooming like poison behind her smile. And now she was pregnant. He wanted to be happy. He tried to be. When she broke the news, his heart leapt. For a moment. "You're pregnant?" he asked, mouth dry. "Yes," she said, her face unreadable. "I just found out." He embraced her, but her arms stayed limp by her sides. Something was off. He felt it in her body, her detachment, her reluctance to look him in the eye. Dwayne started doing the math in his head. It didn't add up. They hadn't made love in weeks. Maybe more. The realization was like a blade to the gut. Still, he didn't confront her, not yet. He needed proof. He started watching her. Quietly, closely. He checked her phone when she was in the shower, but she had changed her passcode. He noticed she'd started locking her drawers, keeping her purse with her at all times. Her phone was always on silent, always face down. At work, he approached an old friend, Jamal, who handled security at the resort. Dwayne asked about Julian. "You ever notice who visits the boss lately? Anyone unusual?" Jamal hesitated, then shrugged. "Man like him? Always got women passing through. But lately, I seen your wife, bro. Once or twice. Don't mean nothing, though." Dwayne's chest tightened. "You sure? Couple weeks ago. Picked up by a company car. Driven to his villa. You never know. Could be business, right?" Dwayne forced a smile and nodded. But inside, something was breaking. At home, Natalie played her role well. Cooking. Working part-time at a local boutique. Smiling for neighbors. But she never reached for Dwayne in bed. She never touched him without flinching. She avoided church. She stopped praying. She stopped being Natalie. Meanwhile, Julian was pushing harder. He began involving Natalie in business decisions, inviting her to spa design meetings, giving her her own company email. He referred to the unborn child as our legacy. But Julian wasn't interested in being a father. He was interested in ownership. "This child changes everything," he told her one night in his penthouse. "With my name on the birth certificate, you'll never worry about money again. Forget Dwayne. You don't need him." Natalie hesitated. He's still my husband, she said. Julian smirked. Not for long. She should have run then. She should have seen the way Julian's eyes darkened, the way he tightened control with every word. But Natalie was in too deep. She tasted wealth, felt the power, lived the lie, and now she was trapped inside it. Then came the ultimatum. Julian told her one night, calmly, coldly, "End things with Dwayne, or I'll end them for you." Natalie froze. "What do you mean?" "Don't pretend to be stupid," he said, lighting a cigar. "You made your choice when you let me into your bed. Now follow through." She left that night shaken, driving home on trembling hands. But when she arrived, Dwayne was waiting silent, still, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before. Calculated rage. He had found her second phone. He had read the messages. He knew everything. "You slept with him," he said. No question. A statement of fact. Natalie didn't lie. She sat down, silent. Dwayne stepped closer. "Whose baby is it?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. That silence was louder than any confession. For Dwayne, that was the final betrayal. A baby, a lie, a knife to the heart from the woman he trusted with his life. In that moment, a seed of violence was planted, quiet, still, but alive. He didn't scream. He didn't hit her. He just said, "You're going to regret this. Both of you." And then he walked away. From that moment on, all three were on a path toward destruction. And the unborn child, innocent and unaware, had no idea they were at the center of a storm that would end in blood. Dwayne Sinclair was not the kind of man who wore rage on his sleeve. He had grown up in a modest home in rural Jamaica, where men learned early to swallow pride and smile through struggle. But betrayal, deep, intimate betrayal, had a way of corroding even the strongest foundations. And Dwayne's was beginning to crack. The morning after Natalie's unspoken confession, Dwayne stood alone in the bathroom, staring at himself in the mirror. His eyes looked different now. Not confused, not broken, cold, calculating, focused. He had a decision to make: fight for his wife or eliminate the source of her destruction. Natalie avoided him in the days that followed. She stayed out longer, claiming errands or business meetings. She barely spoke at home. But Dwayne didn't argue. He didn't accuse. He watched. He started arriving home at odd times, leaving for work but circling back quietly. He began checking her phone, her drawers, her schedule. He memorized her routines: when she called Julian, when she left the house, when she slipped into that black Lexus with the tinted windows. One night, he followed her. She took the long road out of Montego Bay toward the coast, where Julian's private villa loomed like a fortress over the sea. Dwayne parked far back, behind some bushes, and waited. He saw them through the large glass windows. Natalie in Julian's arms, laughing, wine in hand, her belly now slightly showing beneath her fitted dress. And just like that, Dwayne stopped seeing her as his wife. In that moment, she became something else. A traitor, standing beside the man who had humiliated him, stolen his family, corrupted everything they had built. That night, Dwayne returned home and unlocked the small wooden chest in their closet, the one Natalie had begged him years ago to throw away. Inside was a 9mm pistol, wrapped in cloth and memories. He cleaned it carefully, his hands steady. There were no tears, no tremors, just silence. But rage doesn't always strike immediately. Sometimes it festers, and then it waits for the perfect moment to erupt. Meanwhile, Natalie had her own fears. Julian was changing. His charm had grown into obsession. He monitored her every move, where she went, who she spoke to, how long she was gone. "Don't make me look stupid," he warned her one evening after she stayed late visiting a friend. She tried to laugh it off, but he didn't smile. Instead, he took her phone and began scrolling. "You trust me or not?" she asked nervously. "I don't trust anyone," Julian said flatly. "Especially not women who still sleep under another man's roof." Natalie froze. "You told me to keep the peace until after the baby," she said. Julian leaned closer, his breath warm with rum and bitterness. "That was then. This is now. If you're carrying my child, I expect obedience. I didn't give you all this. He waved at the villa's chandeliers and marble countertops. So you could play me like a fool. Natalie felt the first wave of true fear. Julian wasn't just possessive, he was dangerous. And she had no escape. Everything came to a head one humid August night. Natalie came home late. Dwayne was already seated at the dining table, an untouched dinner growing cold before him. He didn't look up as she entered. She dropped her purse, sighed, and headed to the kitchen. As she poured water, she noticed something chilling on the counter. A small, folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. Inside, in Dwayne's careful handwriting, were 3 words. You destroyed us. She turned, heart pounding. But the house was suddenly too quiet. She couldn't see him anymore. Dwayne? She called. No answer. I don't want to fight tonight. Still no answer. She stepped into the hallway, but before she could reach the stairs, she saw him. Standing at the end of the corridor, half in shadow, holding the pistol. Her breath caught. Dwayne, no. But he raised his hand, not to aim yet, but to silence her. I gave you everything, he said calmly. Years, loyalty, love, and you spit on it. She backed away slowly. Please, I'm sorry. It got out of control. I didn't mean for this. His eyes narrowed. Didn't mean to lie? Didn't mean to carry his child. Tears filled her eyes. It's not too late, she whispered. Please, put it down. Dwayne looked at her belly, then at her face, and he turned and walked out the front door. Natalie collapsed to the floor, sobbing. But relief was premature, because Dwayne wasn't leaving to cool off. He was heading toward Julian, and the storm had only just begun. The wind howled along the cliffs that night, salty sea air whipping through the trees surrounding Julian Trench's oceanfront villa. From the outside, the estate looked like something out of a travel magazine, lavish, pristine, secure. But what unfolded within its walls would soon turn paradise into a crime scene. Dwayne's car crept along the winding path leading to the villa's gates. He had turned off his headlights a mile back, letting the moon guide him through the shadows. The pistol sat on the passenger seat, cold and heavy like the rage in his chest. He had spent the drive replaying every moment of betrayal. Natalie's laughter at the dinner table, her fake tiredness, the phone calls in the bathroom, the growing distance in her eyes. And Julian, smug, arrogant Julian, who used his money and position to steal his wife and lay claim to a child Dwayne would never raise. This wasn't just revenge. It was retribution. Inside the villa, Julian poured himself a glass of 21-year-old Appleton rum. He had just finished a call with his lawyer about transferring a property deed to a confidential partner, Natalie. The plan was coming together. He was done playing patient. Dwayne had to be removed from the equation, divorce or otherwise. Julian had connections, strings to pull. But before he could sit down, the front door buzzed. One of his security guards called through the intercom. There's a man at the gate, says it's urgent. Wouldn't give a name. Julian frowned. Let him in. Watch him. The front gate groaned open, and Dwayne stepped out of the car, shoulders squared, weapon tucked under his belt. The security guard eyed him warily, hand resting near his own sidearm. But Julian had given the green light. Dwayne wasn't seen as a threat, yet. Julian met him at the door. You must be feeling bold, showing your face here, he said, casually sipping his rum. Or maybe stupid. Dwayne said nothing. He stepped inside. Julian gestured toward the sitting room. Have a seat. Let's talk like men. I'm not here to talk, Dwayne replied. Julian raised an eyebrow. Then what? Threaten me? You're already out of the picture, Dwayne. You just haven't accepted it. Dwayne's hand slowly reached under his shirt. Julian's eyes widened. Don't be foolish, man. That's not how this ends. You took everything from me, Dwayne said through clenched teeth. My wife, my child, my dignity. Julian laughed bitterly. Your wife came willingly. The child? That's bloodline Sinclair. You lost her the moment she realized you had nothing to offer. That was the last word Julian Trench ever spoke. In one fluid motion, Dwayne drew the pistol and fired. The first shot struck Julian in the chest, knocking him back against the glass coffee table, shattering it into shards. The second hit him in the neck. He gurgled, blood pouring from his mouth, hands twitching as he tried to speak. But Dwayne didn't wait. He turned and walked toward the front door, but a guard was already rushing inside, gun drawn. "Drop it!" the guard yelled. Dwayne raised his hands, still gripping the weapon, and for a moment, everything froze. Then Dwayne turned the gun on himself. A single shot. He collapsed next to the front steps, his blood mixing with rainwater that had begun to fall in heavy sheets. Back at home, Natalie sat in silence, curled on the floor. The house was quiet, but her mind was chaos. Every sound outside made her jump. She had tried calling Dwayne, but he didn't answer. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Shots fired. Emergency at Trench Villa. Police en route. She dropped the phone. Her heart began to race. She knew, before the police ever called, before the media frenzy, before the headlines, she knew what Dwayne had done, and what he had become. In the morning, the tragedy was all over the news. Breaking. Prominent Jamaican resort owner Julian Trench shot and killed in his villa. Shooter identified as local employee Dwayne Sinclair, who died at the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Natalie watched from her bed, the blanket clutched tightly to her chest, her body shaking. Inside her, the baby kicked for the first time, and she began to cry, not just for the men who died, not just for herself, but for the child who would be born into a legacy of greed, betrayal, and blood. The villa was sealed off with police tape. Investigators moved in, collecting bullets, fingerprints, and witness statements. Both bodies, Julian Trench and Dwayne Sinclair, were removed before sunrise. The island woke up to chaos. Natalie was questioned by the police. She denied knowing Dwayne had a gun. She denied any knowledge of Julian's threats. But deep down, she knew everything had spiraled because of her choices. The media called it the Trench Affair massacre. Rumors swirled. Some blamed Dwayne. Others blamed Natalie. No one came to her defense. 2 funerals were held days apart. Dwayne's was quiet. Only a few family members came. His mother wept uncontrollably. Julian's was grand, lavish, high-profile, attended by business moguls and politicians. No mention was made of Natalie. At home, Natalie received threats online. Strangers called her a gold digger, a killer, a manipulator. She stopped leaving the house. Her world had collapsed. She was alone. Months later, Natalie gave birth to a baby boy. He looked nothing like Dwayne. He had Julian's eyes. Holding him, she cried, not out of joy but regret. She named him Elijah, a name meant for peace though he was born from war. There were no family members at the hospital, no friends, just a nurse who whispered softly, "You'll have to be strong now." Natalie left Montego Bay. She changed her name, dyed her hair, and moved to a quiet inland town. She rented a small house and told neighbors she was a widow from Kingston. She worked at a small grocery store and rarely spoke to anyone. She raised Elijah quietly, always fearing the day someone would recognize her. Each night, she stared at old photos, of Dwayne, of Julian, of herself before greed took over.